This is what I needed, a chance to just take a breath and process everything that's been happening in the 1,000-year Blood War. A chance to see some scenes where I'm not watching a slaughter and not seeing a lot of characters get killed in front of my eyes. It was a much needed reprieve from the horrors of the battle and all of the greatness in the narrative that came with that horrible invasion, but this is only a small lull, I'm sure. The war with the Quincy is still raging out there, and despite this being a bit of a calm period in comparison to what we've gotten recently, it's definitely not boring, and Kubo took this time to give a lot of information. So let's get into it, because there's a lot we need to talk about. The initial battle is over, and our Soul Reapers definitely lost and were essentially only saved by the bell. If not for the Vondenreich's weird kind of shadow time limit being reached, the Soul Reapers would have probably been completely massacred. It didn't seem like the Vondenreich had any intention of letting any of them live, and were even going to hide to try to ambush Squad Zero too. But now that the Quincy had to run, the Soul Reapers have a chance to gather their wounded and mourn their dead and kind of process this horrible defeat and kind of think about what they're gonna do moving forward after all of this. Ichigo is physically pretty drained, but I loved that he wanted the doctors to focus on everyone else first. That's very true to his character, and he's dealing much more with mental and emotional injuries right now than physical. After learning about his mom being a Quincy, which means that he's part Quincy, like, he's obviously not okay, but he's pushing that down. It's just that his whole identity is kind of in question now, and it's something he's gonna have to grapple with somehow, but he doesn't have much time in these chapters to really think much about that, and I don't think he wants to right now. I think he just wants to focus on anything else. We get a rundown of how everyone else is doing post-battle as well. Obviously, Head Captain Yamamoto is now gone, and there wasn't enough of him left to recover, not even a body. It was hard seeing the captains deal with that and all of the stress that comes with no longer having a leader, and some of them lost their Bankais, so it's just very heated and tense, and everyone's feeling all these emotions, and I'm sure they're all feeling a lot less safe than they used to, and I don't blame any of them for acting however they need to, and in a time of mourning, you know, people are yelling at each other, they're saying that the visored captains didn't even like Yamamoto, and Shunsui's the only one kind of trying to keep people together, and there's a particular shot in the anime where he's like in the middle of everyone, and I feel like it's either going to be him or Ukitake that takes charge, because they were close to Old Man Yama, and I think it would be interesting to see them have to be put in a leadership position, especially Shunsui, considering how like nonchalant he usually is, but now he's missing an eye, and he survived getting shot a bunch by Commissioner Gordon. So if I'm gonna have to guess, I would say he should be the new head captain. If not him, then Ukitake, but Ukitake's like sick, so I don't know. Thousands of other Soul Reapers are dead, and I assume Izuru is still among them after his horrible death, and fake Aizen probably didn't make it either with how he went down, and Byakuya Kuchiki's definitely dead. Byakuya's alive? How? What? 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 Well, I feel very dumb right now. After such a dramatic end and beautifully written final moments, it turns out Byakuya didn't die after all. I teared up thinking I was seeing his death scene twice, and I grieved and mourned this man only for him to have survived. Sure, he's in bad shape and he might never wake up, but yeah, he's not dead. There's a chance he'll be able to recover. It's real serious, but yeah, the man is still breathing after all of that, after all those scenes where Kubo was really pushing the emotions of his ending, you know, where Byakuya's saying, "I've only got a few minutes left." I'm honestly not sure how to feel about this after all of that. I had come to terms with his apparent demise and actually really liked the place it had in the story and to the stakes of the war as a whole. Like I discussed then in previous videos, it was very powerful, and to me it felt like a fitting time to end his story in the way that it was ending. Like, it just felt pretty right. Like, yeah, he didn't get a final scene with Rukia, and yeah, he didn't have a big victorious ending. It felt like his story arc had kind of come to a conclusion, and his remaining potential in the story was being sacrificed toward contributing to the threat of the Vondenreich, and maybe towards Rukia's growth or to Renji's growth, that they would no longer have Byakuya helping them, and instead he'd be an inspiration to them moving forward. I don't know. it felt like that was the end, didn't it? And you guys, the whole time I was doing those videos, you were all probably sitting there like, Byakuya's not even dead. Why is this guy spending 5 minutes tearing up and talking about how amazing of a death Byakuya had? He's not even dead. Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know that he was gonna survive a scene where he was like looking up into nothingness and apologizing to Rukia and Renji in his mind, and then his sword shattering. It just seemed like it was the end. It did. This isn't like Pell surviving a nuclear bomb point blank in One Piece level of ludicrous or anything. Like, there was always a chance that Byakuya could live, I guess. Like, it doesn't seem absolutely ridiculous when it comes to the circumstances. Yeah, maybe he could survive getting hit by his own Bankai. You know, like, logically, sure. It's more so the feeling of it after the way those scenes played out. There was a tragic finality about them that I guess wasn't so final after all. I don't know. A part of me thinks that him living kind of robs those moments a little bit. Like, to me, all of that feeling like his end was a part of why those scenes hit so hard in the moment. Like, at least for me, it felt like those especially hit because it felt like that was the last we were ever going to see of Byakuya, and he was going down heroically but tragically. And don't get me wrong, Byakuya being alive but so beaten that he has to ask Ichigo for help is still a fantastic moment, but is it quite as good if it's not his dying wish? I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's better this way than it would have been if that was his ending. But hey, maybe I'll look back and be like, oh, thank God he survived so we could have something amazing happen later. I don't know, there's still that chance that this miraculous survival will lead to something phenomenal with him, but yeah, I'm shocked that he's alive. I am shocked. Like, still, I've had a few days to really think about this and to try to figure out how I feel about it, and I'm still just shocked and kind of uncertain if this was the right decision by Kubo. And it's his story, of course. It's where he wants to take these characters, but the way he was writing it, it felt so final, but maybe I was just reading too much into it. I don't know. I'm gonna wait and see how Byakuya is used down the road to see whether or not I think he should have died or not. It's just very, very surprising. And I feel silly for how much I tried to honor his death with those videos because I was that upset by it. Like, I really was emotionally moved, and I think that's why it feels a little weird that I got taken to that place where I was like, okay, like, that's the end of Byakuya. This is really sad, but it's fitting. And now I'm like, oh no, he's actually all right. But in actuality, I feel like I'm a surgeon calling the time of death prematurely, you know? Like, I'm just like, time of death, and then he pops up on the gurney, you know? But it's like almost worse than that. Like, I am Denethor in Lord of the Rings trying to burn a guy because I think he's dead, and I'm completely ignoring the Hobbit screaming at me, telling me that he's alive. But yeah, I am conflicted. The writer in me is like, his death at this point would have been super effective for a variety of reasons, but part of me is happy for him, and happy Rukia won't have to mourn him, and like I said, maybe it'll bring about something awesome, but after how much page time was used to make his actions feel final and tragic, it feels like a bit of a weird U-turn now. I don't know. I've spent the last 5 minutes explaining why I'm conflicted, but I really am. I really don't know if this is a good decision or not. I felt very strongly that that worked really well, and now we'll just have to see. My boy Kenny is also in rough shape after challenging the Quincy King, and I loved Ikaku's kind of heartbreaking reaction to hearing about that. To him, it's an impossibility, which makes it even more crushing that it's true. In the aftermath of all of this, another character I really want to discuss that had a few fascinating scenes in this part of the story is Captain Unohana. She's becoming more and more interesting, especially now in a time of like full-scale war. She's the big medic of the Soul Society, like we've known that for a long time now. So she really should be more essential than ever trying to help people in this attack, but she hasn't been helping them like at all. I briefly pointed out like a couple videos ago how weak weird it was that she was shown to be standing around somewhere looking at a flower with Asane when Yamamoto used his Bankai. Like, it looked like a cozy house and they're just chilling, and from those panels alone, you wouldn't even know that a battle was raging nearby. In those panels, everything looked pretty normal. Unohana had completely recused herself from the battle, but apparently it wasn't her choice. Instead, it was the last order given to her by Captain Yamamoto, and that was such a strange thing to really consider for me. Why would he do that? What's the point of being a medic if you ignore the people that are grievously injured? There has to be a good reason, there has to be, and I'm excited to learn it. I suppose he could have just been not wanting to put them at risk too, you know, keep the medics alive so they might be able to help whoever is left rather than have them out there getting killed. That's a possibility. But the only other thing I could think of were these cryptic lines that to me are evidence of something I've suspected for a long time, that Unohana is actually stronger than she looks. I've been saying for a while that her medical knowledge might make her an extremely dangerous opponent, like she might know how to dismantle someone better than anyone else. And I haven't forgotten that Rudborn refused to fight her in Waco Mundo. He was too scared to fight her. I'd be scared to fight her giant manta ray too. But it's crazy to think that Yamamoto would be that cautious about her capabilities when he himself unleashed his own power that could have destroyed all of the Soul Society on its own. He's willing to use that kind of power, so is hers worse? Even more dangerous? I don't know, but that, along with things said to her later, definitely make me think that she's continuing to hide some real strength outside of her medical expertise. But I've thought that for a while. She's gotta be secretly badass in some way. Another casualty of the battle is Ichigo's Zanpakuto being broken while his Bankai was active, which is apparently not something that can be easily fixed for most people. Ichigo is gonna have to rely on his own mind and his spirit to try to mend it, which should be interesting, and from the sounds of some of the conversations later, it seems like the sword is gonna have to be like reforged into something new, which is really exciting. I can't wait to see how it's gonna change going forward, especially with the information he has now about himself and his own power. Could he reforge it into something more like that's a mix of Quincy and Soul Reaper, you know? Like, could it be like a sword that can also function as like an arrow? I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what the sword's gonna look like after all this. The examples used of Renji's Bankai and Ikaku's Bankai not being as strong as they used to be after being broken were also fascinating, and Komamura being so physically bound to his Bankai is something I'd love to dive more into at some point. I think that's really interesting, but it makes sense with the way it functions, where it kind of follows his movement. It becomes like an avatar for him to use, like a giant spiritual mech, you know? And the manga chapters gave us a hilarious reunion with Cone, but where he was all buff and muscular and has been in Soul Society the whole time since the last time we saw him. And it was really funny and I liked it a lot. And then the anime mostly entirely cut it out. I guess it might have felt out of place with the tone of the episode, or maybe it had to do with like saving time. But I really enjoyed that scene, and it was great seeing Cone again after so long. There were a couple similar little moments that got cut from this episode that were in the manga. There was this Cone reunion, there was the eventual reunion with Kukaku. They changed the hot spring scene later as well to not be as funny, you know? It seems like there's an effort to kind of be a bit more serious with the tone of the anime, rather, where the manga had these little moments of like typical Bleach humor. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I can understand the reasoning if that's the case, but I miss those moments. I feel like they add a little something, especially like this Cone reunion scene was so good, and then in the episode it's just like, oh, Cone ran by. I was like, what? But oh well. The captains all gather for the arrival of Squad Zero, the Soul King's Royal Guards, and this was so exciting since I've been curious ever since they were mentioned in Turn Back the Pendulum, and now they're finally here. And they're overall a little bit quirkier than I expected, honestly, but I really like that subversion because it's balanced out by just how powerful they are. I was stunned to learn that there are only 5 of them in the entire squad, and each of them are a captain. Not only that, these these 5 alone are apparently more powerful than the entirety of the Court Guard squads, which is insane and something to keep in mind, because there is the matter of why Zero Squad didn't come try to help during the invasion, and that's something that came to my mind too as we were going through all this. Like, these guys might have made a big difference, and you would think maybe they might help given that they all used to be members of the squads, I think. But honestly, I understand them not coming down to help. I'm not going to hold it against them too much because they were sticking to their duties, kind of like Unohana was with her medics. And the duties of the Royal Guards are obviously reserved for protecting the Soul King, not protecting the Serete. When it comes to duties like that and oaths, you know, maybe it's just the Game of Thrones fan in me, but it's like Jaime Lannister running off to help fight his family's war and abandoning his post as a Kingsguard. It just didn't feel right, and it was looked down upon. As much as I wish that Squad Zero did come to help, it seemed like a part of Yuabaha's plan was to try to lure the Royal Guards down. So by not coming to reinforce their other Soul Reapers, they didn't play into Yuabaha's hands. But yeah, these guys are super strong, and there are very few of them. As for the members themselves, there's Kiryu Hikafune, who's the one that got mentioned back in Turn Back the Pendulum when they first brought up Squad Zero, that she had been promoted to become a Royal Guard. And apparently she's changed a lot since becoming a member of Squad Zero, and it seems like it's because she put on weight, but I'm sure that won't affect her abilities. With the whole pink-haired, big appetite but still powerful thing she's got going on, I'm kinda getting a much less deranged Big Mom from One Piece, probably less children too. But yeah, she's Hiyori's former captain that they brought up back in Turn Back the Pendulum. I mean, it's not confirmed, but I feel like she might be the most recent member of Squad Zero, maybe? I know there was 100 years between now and Turn Back the Pendulum where someone else could have been recruited, but I didn't see any of these people during that flashback, so I assume she's the most recent member. And next is Tenjiro Korinji. This guy is probably the one I've seen the most of so far. He's notably a very knowledgeable healer and taught Unohana everything she knows. Once we see his healing methods, they're pretty unorthodox, but no doubt effective. But it's this guy's look that really caught my attention because he's just this tall, lanky, kind of very cocky looking dude. And his hair reminds me of that one guy from Shaman King, you know, the guy with the gang in the graveyard. It's been a lot of years since I read Shaman King, like probably I was a kid still when I started Shaman King, but I loved it back then, and I only read like probably 2 or 3 volumes, I'd say. Yeah, he looks like that guy. He's very mouthy, but backs up his arrogance with some clear expertise and a very shocking display of speed as well. And I just like his attitude. I think he's fun. I think he's a fun character with great hair. This guy, I don't think we got a name for him. I don't have it here in my notes, but he looks jovial and chill, a little bit like a monk, but maybe it's just the beads that he's wearing. I picture him as having like an overall chill demeanor, but is actually extremely powerful once he cuts loose. He's just got that vibe, like jovial but strong. And this one has a dangerousness about her. She apparently knows Mayuri and used to maybe be a scientist for the Soul Society. My patrons reminded me that Urahara started the R&D lab, but the way she talks about how she like strolled right into the lab makes me think she either used to be a scientist of some kind, or maybe she used to be a criminal, because, you know, she knows Mayuri, and when we first met Mayuri, he was in the Maggot's Nest cells, so maybe she knew him from that side of things, doing like shady experiments. But she has these really cool artificial arms, and I'm not sure if those are her only arms, or if she actually has arms of her own, but her whole design is really cool and interesting looking. Oh, and there's this guy, who we've barely seen, but he's got style. His robe being like a vest is pretty cool, and he looks fun, and he looks happy, and I'm not sure why he kind of stayed out of the conversation, but I want to see more of him. I don't think he spoke to anyone during that whole scene. It was mostly everyone else. Anyway, they want to take Ichigo up to the Soul King's palace along with some of the injured, including the miraculously alive Byakuya, and this is all just super exciting for me because it's a whole new section of the world. But before they are able to go with him. We get a call from Urahara showing that him, Orihime, and Chad are all fine. But that's not the real headline for me. We get a glimpse of the person that saved them from Kyuge. After reading the manga chapter, I was about 95% sure that it was Grimmjow. Not only does it make sense narratively for him to maybe be there and based on Ichigo's reaction, but the little glimpse we saw of him in those panels looked a little like Grimmjow. You know, the bottom portion of him with like the skirt and the belt, and then the sleeves, the little bit of sleeve you saw, it looked like Grimmjow to me. And then the anime straight up confirmed it. Specifically, the subtitles were just repeatedly saying it's Grimmjow, and it even showed his hollow hole just to make it even more clear. But I wasn't too upset by this since I already believed it was him, but if I hadn't read the manga, and this was the first time that I saw this scene and that the thought occurred to me, I'd probably be really annoyed, honestly. Still, it's a shame that he didn't have a more dramatic entrance, and if he eventually gets one, it is soured just a little, but oh well. I'm so excited to see him back in the story and helping out anyway. Like, no matter what the reveal was, I'm just glad he's back. I think there's so much potential for a lot of fun interactions, especially if he's going to be helping us now, instead of trying to kill us, but I'm sure he'll still want to fight Ichigo. And speaking of former enemies that are now on our side, it seems Ganju Shiba has plucked the spirits of some dead antagonists out of the afterlife to help train. The 3 dead Fullbringers, the Execution Leader and former substitute Soul Reaper Ginjo, the timely King Bradley doppelganger Giriko, and even my uncle himself, Tsukishima. That was a wonderful reveal, and I'm excited to see them on our side. I imagine Tsukishima can mess up some Quincy's with his Fullbring. Like, make Hoshvalt believe that Tsukishima is his majesty. That would be pretty amazing. Anyway, between the dead Fullbringers, Grimmjow, and Aizen still being around in his cell, there's a chance for Ichigo to have to work with some of his biggest opponents against the Vondenreich, and I think that's got potential for all kinds of great scenes. I would love that. It would feel fitting in this final arc to kind of bring some of those people back in a new way. I'd love to see him have to work with them. I think that'd be super interesting. But all of this still wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough. This is still dropping all kinds of lore and answers on me. There was one other thing that we saw when we revisited the Shiba family when Ichigo needed to be launched to the palace. And that was something the manga hinted at, but the anime blatantly showed. Kukaku mentions that their uncle would be disappointed in them for letting Ichigo get into trouble up there. And when I first read this, I got my wires crossed and I thought she was talking about Kaien or something, but obviously Kaien was their brother, not their uncle. When this happened in the anime though, it made it very clear who they were talking about, because it showed someone that looked a whole lot like Isshin Kurosaki with them. So Isshin is their uncle. Isshin is a Shiba, and that makes so much sense. Since very early on in the series, there's obviously been comparisons made between Ichigo and Kai and Shiba. They visually looked similar and had similar vibes, but I kind of chalked it up to like more spiritual resemblance, like what Kaien represented lived on somehow. But no, it's more than that. They're actual family. Cousins. Ichigo's real cousin this time. And that's crazy. But I honestly should have suspected something like that once I knew about Isshin being a Soul Reaper, right? But it never crossed my mind. I loved that little reveal, and just the small crumb of a little more of Isshin's past. Keep it coming, Kubo. I want the whole story. Just keep giving me Isshin's backstory. This was a nice little extra tease again, but just tell me. Anyway, Ichigo travels up to the palace, and I love the look of this place. It's just very otherworldly and not what you would immediately think of if you heard the word palace, you know? It's also cool that each guard is given their own floating city. It maybe opens up potential to learn a bit more about their personalities through the settings. I think that could be interesting. The general aesthetic of the place is kind of simple and holy feeling, you know? It feels like a sacred place. It's giving a much more expansive kind of Kami's lookout from Dragon Ball. And I can't wait to explore more of it. So far, we've only seen the very potent healing hot springs. The revelation that the guards make up the Okin within them was a good one after how much time we spent watching Aizen attempt to make the Okin. Like, I assume the way they were talking, it sounded like Aizen, if he had been able to create the Okin, it wouldn't just have been him creating a physical key. He would have created, it sounded almost like clones of them or people that would have had similar capabilities to them. Like, he would have had a group of people that would have been able to bring him here. Because the only way to get to the royal palace is either if you are one of the royal guards or if they allow you to come in with them. And it's just crazy that we're here in the royal palace, you know? The place that Aizen's whole goal was to reach. It felt like this far away, impossible to reach place. Because for Aizen, at the time it was. Nobody was letting him in, people were trying to stop him from getting in. But here we are. And it's a little surreal, even for me as just a reader, that we're actually here. Lastly, we finally get our first glimpse of Reo, the Soul King, and it's not much to go off of except that he doesn't look like a normal person, and I was reminded of how Aizen talked about him a while back. He referred to the Soul King as a thing, and was shocked that anyone would follow it. And from what little we see here, yeah, the Soul King doesn't seem like a traditional guy with a crown on a throne. There's an otherworldliness about him, even compared to other spiritual entities like Soul Reapers or Hollows. He's beyond such things, kind of like what Aizen had been turning himself into. So I'm very curious to see more of him. But it seems like we're set up for a bit of a recovery and training arc in the Royal Palace, which will be a nice change of pace, honestly. After this defeat, it's pretty clear that our protagonists need to get much stronger if they're gonna be able to take on the Vondenreich, like a whole lot stronger, and I'm all for this. I love that even this far into the story, we're still exploring big parts of this universe and getting more and more answers to questions that I've had for a long time. It really is feeling like the final arc. We're seeing places that seemed so out of reach before. We're learning things about people we never knew. It's great. It's great. And it's this big lore drop. It's been a lot to take in, a lot to talk about. I'm sure I missed a couple things. I'm excited to see what happens next. Looks like we're going to be getting stronger. And I love training arcs. You know this. I've talked about it before. I love their places in the story. And I think this has potential for it to be really interesting to see Ichigo learn from these people as they help him heal and somehow help Byakuya come back from certain death. That's all for now. Thanks as always for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe if you want to see more that I don't have here on the channel, like the manga read-along or the anime episode reactions. Please join the Patreon. As always, there's going to be a manga read-along on Monday, anime reaction Tuesday, and we'll go from there. But yeah, hope you all have a great day. Take care.